Welcome back to the Paranormal Inc. of Ohio podcast, the podcast where we dive into the world's darkest urban legends, haunted locations, and unexplained mysteries. I'm your host, Ed, and tonight we're talking about a ritual that many people claim is more than just an internet horror story. A game that some say should never be played. A ritual so disturbing that people who claim to have survived it refuse to ever speak of it again. It's called the Midnight Game. Was it once an ancient punishment? Is it simply mass hysteria? Or are those who play it really inviting something into their homes? Turn down the lights, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't play this game at midnight. What is the Midnight Game? The Midnight Game is said to have originated centuries ago, with stories claiming it was used as a punishment for people who disobeyed powerful religious leaders. While there's little historical evidence proving those origins, the legend has taken on a life of its own in modern times. The ritual exploded into popularity online in the early 2010s. Forums, creepypasta websites, and paranormal communities were filled with stories from people who claimed to have played it. Some dismissed it as fiction. Others swore they had experienced something impossible. The rules seem simple. According to believers, one mistake could leave you face to face with an entity known only as the Midnight Man. The rules, according to the legend, you'll need a candle, a lighter or matches, a piece of paper, a pen, salt, a wooden front door, a drop of your own blood. Just before midnight, you write your full name on the paper. You place a drop of blood on it. Then you tape it to your front door. At exactly midnight, you knock on the door 22 times. The final knock must happen as the clock strikes midnight. Then, open the door, wait a few seconds, close it again. Light your candle, and the game has begun. The objective for the next 3 hours. You must wander your home. You may never stay in one place too long. If your candle goes out, you're said to have only seconds to relight it. If you fail, you're instructed to surround yourself with salt immediately. Do not leave the salt circle until 3:33 a.m. because if you do, the Midnight Man is said to find you. And according to the legend, he doesn't kill you. He makes you experience your greatest fears. Some stories claim the pain feels completely real. Others say people who survive are never mentally the same again. The first experience. One of the earliest stories shared online came from someone who claimed they laughed at the legend. He gathered a few friends. They thought it would be funny. Nothing happened during the setup. Everyone laughed until about 20 minutes after midnight, the lights flickered. One friend joked someone had flipped the breaker. Then every candle in the house went out at exactly the same time. The power stayed on. They relit the candles. One of the players insisted someone had whispered directly into his ear. No one else had been standing near him. They laughed it off until they checked the recording from a camera they left running. There was no whisper, but there was a loud knock coming from upstairs. The problem? No one had gone upstairs. A warning. Whether these stories are true or simply internet folklore, one thing is consistent. People who discuss the Midnight Game almost always end with the same warning. Don't try it. Not because you'll summon a monster, but because fear has a way of changing what we think we see. A dark house, one small candle, hours of silence, every creak becomes footsteps, every shadow becomes a figure, and sometimes our own minds can become the scariest place of all. But the strangest stories were only beginning. In part 1, we talked about the legend of the Midnight Game, a ritual that supposedly allows something called the Midnight Man into your home. Many people believe it's nothing more than a creepypasta story created online. But others claim something happened to them, something they can't explain. Tonight we're looking at the stories that helped us with this legend and helped us grow. Remember, there are claims and legends shared by people online that are not proven events. But sometimes the stories people tell are what keep legends alive. The house with the footsteps. One story comes from a group of college friends who decided to attempt the ritual as a joke. They had heard about the midnight game online and thought it would make a great late night challenge. They gathered at an old house where one of them was staying. They prepared everything: the candle, the paper, the salt, the clock. As midnight approached, everyone was laughing. They were recording the whole thing, hoping to get a funny video. The final knock happened. The door opened. The game began. At first, nothing. For almost 30 minutes, nothing happened. One person joked, "Looks like the Midnight Man didn't get the invitation." Everyone laughed. Then they heard it, a single footstep from the second floor. The problem? Everyone was standing in the living room. Nobody was upstairs. They assumed someone was playing a prank. They searched the house. The upstairs rooms were empty, but one bedroom door that had been closed was now open. Inside the room was a chair facing the corner. The friends claimed they found the chair turned toward the doorway, as if someone had been sitting there, watching them. They ended the game early. They said they never played again. The candle that wouldn't stay lit. Another popular story involves someone who attempted the midnight game alone. According to the story, the person didn't believe anything supernatural. They wanted to prove that fear was all in your mind. They followed the steps. The clock struck midnight. The door was opened and closed. The candle was lit. Then they started walking through the house. At first, everything was normal. Then, the candle went out. They relit it. A few minutes later, it went out again. They checked the candle. Nothing was wrong. No wind, no draft. Nothing that should have caused it. Then came the sound. A tapping noise. 3 taps from the bedroom window. The person said they froze because they lived on the second floor. There was no balcony, no tree nearby, no way anyone could have been outside. They grabbed the salt and ended the ritual. The next morning, they claimed they found 3 marks on the outside of the window. They had no explanation for how they got there. The shadow in the hallway. Perhaps the most common type of midnight game story involves seeing a figure, a person-shaped shadow, a silhouette, something standing just far enough away that you can't make out details. One story describes a player walking through their home when they noticed something at the end of the hallway. At first, they thought it was a family member. They called out, no answer. They moved closer. The figure didn't move. They raised the candle, and according to the story, the figure disappeared. But the room suddenly became freezing cold. The player immediately ended the game. Years later, they claimed they still refused to walk through that hallway at night. Why do people believe these stories? The midnight game is interesting because it combines several things humans have always feared: darkness, isolation, the unknown, and the idea that we can accidentally invite something into our world. Many paranormal investigators believe rituals like this become powerful because of expectation. When someone believes something is going to happen, their mind begins searching for signs. A house settling becomes footsteps, a shadow becomes a person, a random noise becomes a warning. But there are also people who believe that explanation doesn't cover everything. They ask, why do so many cultures have stories about rituals involving doors, names, and invitations? Why are there so many legends about calling something into your home? And why? Does the idea of opening a door to something unknown scare us so much? The Midnight Man. The creature at the center of this legend is known as the Midnight Man. Descriptions vary. Some say he appears as a tall shadow figure. Others describe him as a person with no visible face. Some say he simply watches. Others claim he creates terrifying visions. The most disturbing part of the legend isn't what he does, it's what he represents. The fear that something could be standing right behind you, and you would never know. The Midnight Game may only be an urban legend, a story created to scare people. a modern campfire tale told through the internet, but every generation has its own scary stories, and sometimes the stories that stay with us the longest are the ones that make us wonder, what if? Because the scariest question isn't always, is the legend real? Sometimes the scariest question is, what if it is? Tonight we're exploring one of the internet's most infamous modern urban legends, the Midnight Game. A ritual involving a candle, a name, a door, and a mysterious entity known as the Midnight Man. We've heard the stories, we've heard the claims, but now we have to ask the question, where did this legend actually come from? Was it based on an ancient ritual, a forgotten piece of folklore, or was it something created in the digital age that grew into something much bigger? The birth of a modern legend. Unlike legends passed down through generations around campfires, the Midnight Game is a different kind of story. It was born online. Around the early 2010s, horror communities, forums, and creepypasta websites began sharing the rules of the ritual. For those unfamiliar, creepypasta stories are internet horror tales written to feel like real accounts. Some are clearly fictional, others are written in a way that makes readers question whether there could be some truth hidden inside. The Midnight Game became popular because it felt different. It wasn't just a story about a monster. It was a challenge, a set of instructions, a way for people to feel like they could step into the legend themselves. The power of rituals. The interesting thing about the Midnight Game is that it uses ideas humans have feared for centuries. Doors, names, darkness, invitations. Across many cultures, there are beliefs that names have power. The idea is that knowing someone's true name gives you a connection to them. That belief appears in many old stories around the world. The Midnight Game takes that ancient fear, combines it with a modern setting, a person's own home. And that's what makes it unsettling. A haunted castle is scary, an abandoned building is also scary, but a normal house, a place where you sleep, a place where you feel safe. The idea that something could enter that space is what makes this legend so effective. The doorway between worlds. One of the biggest symbols in paranormal stories is the doorway. Throughout history, doors have represented a boundary. One side is the known world, the other side is the unknown. Many legends involve opening doors, windows, mirrors, or gates to something that shouldn't be there. The Midnight Game follows the same pattern. The player is told to open the door, invite something in, and then try to survive until morning. Whether someone believes in the supernatural or not, the symbolism is powerful. You are literally opening a doorway and asking, is anything listening? Why do people play? A question many people ask is, why would someone try something like this? Why intentionally scare yourself? The answer may be simpler than what we think. Humans have always been fascinated by fear. From haunted houses during Halloween to scary movies, ghost stories around a fire, fear gives us a rush. It allows us to experience danger while still feeling safe. But the Midnight Game takes that step further. It removes the audience. There's no movie screen, no haunted attraction, no one telling you when the scare happens. You are alone and in the dark, waiting. The psychology of the Midnight Game. Many researchers who study fear explain that the human brain is designed to find patterns. When we're afraid, our senses become sharper. A small noise becomes important. A shadow catches our attention. A normal event can suddenly feel threatening. Imagine sitting in a dark house at 2 a.m. You hear the floor creak. Your brain immediately asks, what is that? Even if the answer is something ordinary. For a moment, your imagination fills in the blanks. That is why urban legends like the Midnight Game are so powerful. The legend doesn't need to show you the monster. Your mind creates one. The Midnight Man is a symbol. But maybe the Midnight Man isn't just a monster in a story. Maybe he represents something deeper. The fear of being watched. The fear of being alone. The fear that there are things in this world we don't understand. The most frightening part of the legend isn't necessarily the creature, it's the waiting. Standing in the hallway, holding the candle, listening, wondering if that sound was just a house settling or something else. Fact or fiction? So where does that leave us? Is the Midnight Game real? There is no verified evidence that anyone has summoned an entity through this ritual. There are no confirmed cases proving the Midnight Man exists. The legend continues to spread like wildfire. Why? Because good stories survive. They adapt, they change, they find new people to scare. And every person who hears the story has the same thought. I would never do that. Followed by another thought. Would I? The Midnight Game may be nothing more than a modern ghost story, a legend created on the internet, a frightening idea passed from person to another. But maybe that's the true power of an urban legend. It doesn't have to be proven, it only has to make you wonder. Because sometimes the scariest things aren't the things we see, they're the things we can't explain. This is the final chapter of our journey into one of the internet's most unsettling urban legends, the Midnight Game. A story built around one simple idea. What happens when you invite something unknown into your home? We've explored the rules, we've heard the stories, we've looked at where the legend came from, but tonight we end with the question that keeps this legend alive. Would you open the door? Other games of the unknown. The Midnight Game is not only the legend built around contacting something unseen. For generations, people have been fascinated by rituals that supposedly connect our world with another. Games involving spirits, mirrors, names, and nighttime rituals appear in many cultures. Some are old traditions, some are modern inventions, but they all share something in common: a curiosity about what exists behind what we can't see. Humans have always looked into the darkness and wondered, is anyone looking back? The danger of inviting fear. Whether someone believes the Midnight Game is supernatural or not, there is one thing that cannot be denied. Fear is powerful. Spending hours alone in the darkness, expecting something to happen, can affect the way we experience the world around us. Your senses become stronger. Your imagination becomes louder. Every sound becomes important. Every shadow becomes suspicious. A house you've lived in for years can suddenly feel like a completely different place. The hallway you've walked through 1,000 times becomes unfamiliar. The bedroom you've slept in becomes a place of question. And sometimes, the scariest monster is the one our own mind creates. The stories that never get explained. But then there are the stories that people claim they can't explain. The person who says they heard footsteps when nobody was home. The person who claims they saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. The person who says their candle went out even though there was no wind. Are these experiences caused by fear, a coincidence, the power of suggestion, or is it something else? That is the mystery behind every urban legend. The line between fact and fiction becomes blurred. If the Midnight Game were real, imagine for a moment, it's midnight, the house is silent. You hear the clock strike 12. You perform the ritual. The final knock echoes through the house. You open the door. Nothing. You close it. You light your candle. The first hour passes. Nothing happens. You start laughing. You tell yourself the stories were fake. Then, a sound. It's a small sound. From somewhere down the hallway. You turn. Nothing. You look back at your candle. The flame moves. Not from wind. From a draft, just a movement, a flicker, and suddenly the joke isn't funny anymore, because now you have to ask yourself, if something is here, how do I know? Why the legend survives. The Midnight Game has survived because it represents a fear that almost everyone understands, the fear of being alone, the fear of the unknown, the fear that our world might be bigger and stranger than we realize. Every generation creates its own monsters. Every generation tells its own ghost stories. The monsters change, the stories change, but the fear, it stays the same. The final question. So is the Midnight Game real? There is no confirmed evidence that a supernatural being called the Midnight Man exists. There are no proven cases of this ritual opening a doorway to another world, but does that mean the legend has no power? Not necessarily. Because the legends don't survive because they are proven. They survive because they make us feel something. They make us question. They make us look over our shoulder. They make us wonder, what if? Sometimes that one question is enough to keep a story alive forever. Before we close tonight's episode, I want to leave you with this. The darkness itself isn't always what scares us. It's what we imagine might be hiding inside it. The Midnight Game may only be a story, a modern legend, a tale passed around the internet. But every time someone hears the rules, every time someone looks at the clock at midnight, every time someone hears a strange noise in an empty house, the legend lives again. So if you ever find yourself alone late at night and you hear a knock at the door, remember, not every door is meant to be opened. Thank you for joining us with the Paranormal Link Ohio podcast. And this has been The Midnight Game, Urban Legends, Fact, Fiction, or Something Else. Until next time, keep searching, keep questioning, and remember, the truth is always out there. Thank you guys so much for checking out tonight's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I love each and every single one of you. I can't thank you enough. You are the reason why I continue to do this. And you will hear from me in the next one. Thanks. Bye, everyone.